I just hit my strike and my shit going. What's up, my dudes? MX Simulator versus MX Bikes in 2021. Now, I know I've made a video like this 2 or 3 years ago, but there's been a lot of things that's changed about both of these games the past 2 or 3 years, so I thought it was really important for me to come in here and make a updated video about this. I know a lot of people have been talking about it, should you buy MX Simulator, should you buy MX Bikes in 2021, that sort of, idea has been floating around there quite a bit. So I got no friends in this, mama. I don't pretend with it, mama. I just roll with it, mama. Rolling stones with it, mama. First things first, MX Simulator is having an identity issue right now. It's like it doesn't even know what it is anymore. It's like this weird, kind of like an MX Simulator 2 with the whole erode thing, right? They took a feature that was never even really a thing in the game. I mean, nobody played with erode on MX Simulator from the time the game came out all the way up basically until 2017 and 18, whenever it really started coming around. Nobody even really knew the game had a terrain deformation system into it because it was so bad. It was so, it wasn't even made to actually be a terrain deformation system. It wasn't optimized. It wasn't good at all, right? So you have literally 80% of the track content of MX Simulator that was not even made for a terrain deformation system. It was not even made around that, right? It's literally the only motocross game that I know of that tried to add a terrain deformation system into it, with later on in the life cycle of the game. Every other game that has a terrain deformation system, like MX Bikes, Reflex, all those games have had it from day one. So it's like that's how you've always played the game, right? But with MX Sim, the game was out for at least, or 10 years rather, before anybody even thought about a terrain deformation system in the game, right? So you kind of had one kind of game for 10 years with MX Simulator, and then they started introducing the erode system, which came with a plethora of its own issues and shitty optimization. The developer himself has spoke about this multiple times. It came with a lot of issues when they first started trying to do it in the pro racing and everything like that. If you've actually pro raced through that on MX Sim, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's kind of like, now you've got some tracks that are made for erode, some of them that aren't made for erode, but then you have that whole entire back catalog of MX Simulator custom tracks, tens of thousands of custom tracks that were never even made for it, and they're more built with pre-made. And on top of all that, even if you go back to some of those tracks that weren't quote-unquote made for erode on MX Simulator, even if you turn erode on those tracks, it's not even the same kind of erode that you would get after they added that update somewhere in there 2019. They added a update to the terrain deformation system to where it doesn't make it as splicey and weird janky, but it doesn't apply to any of those older tracks that were made before 2018 or 19. So yeah, you can still turn the erode on the old tracks, but it's absolute shit compared to the new erode system in the game. So in a way, it's like you got two different worlds going on here right now in MX Simulator, right? You got the deformation on the newer tracks, but then you got all the older tracks that don't really flow very good with it, don't really run very good with it. And then you also have the whole thing where, it's not all that much fun on MX Simulator to ride in single player with erode. It's just not. It's not fun to go in there on a new track that was built around a road with all these small-ass ruts, small roughness, and try to turn a road on, because it's going to take about 30 laps to actually build any kind of rut. And if you try to turn the erode higher to where it'll build it faster, then it'll just build terrible, ruts and roughness because the erode is too high. So it's not a very, single-player friendly feature to MX Simulator. It's a very okay, you need 40 people with a super low erode setting, then it'll actually feel halfway decent. or some kind of rideable, I guess you'd call it. But it's not a single-player oriented thing, right? So I feel like it's very bizarre for a lot of new players to hop into MXM, try to get on some new track, and it's like doesn't really have the proper amount of pre-made, but then it's like they turn a road on and there's like just a little bit of ruts being developed, which is a totally different environment than you have when you have a lot of bikes, or if you're riding on the tracks before a road came around that had the right amount of pre-made roughness and big enough ruts and all that. So you got this weird twisted world going on. It's too much to even explain in one video, right? Then you got MX Bikes over here that is it downright, it ain't even a question that MX Bikes is winning when it comes to like advertisement, more of that beginner friendly, get you into the game quicker. MX Bikes is on Steam. Hello? What are you doing, JLV? Please explain to me why MX Simulator is not on Steam yet to, automatically update through all the snapshots. You know how bizarre that is for a new player to get on MX Simulator and download the new update, but yet there's 5 snapshots? What the fuck even is a snapshot is what 99% of those people are going to say. And then they have to try to go through there and figure out how to download the snapshot and put it in the right folder. It's too complicated. Put the game on Steam, JLV. You'll have literally 3 times as many people buying and playing your game. It is mind-baffling that this game, MX Simulator, is not on Steam yet. But anyways, aside from that, you got MX Bikes where the terrain deformation actually has a cushion feeling to it because, it's more of a modern game engine, not a 2007 game made by one guy. So the deformation actually has a little bit of a plush, cushiony feeling to it. It's got that cush feel, dog. And MX Simulator doesn't have that at all. You're literally riding on rock-solid terrain and then digging down in the terrain, but it's still rock-solid terrain. You're not changing the softness or the plushness of it at all, right? So in a way, on MX Simulator, it's like you're riding on the most hard-packed blue groove ruts you've ever rode on in your life, no matter if you're on a sand track or a hard-pack track or a normal dirt track, if you have the road turned on in the game. If you don't, MX Simulator is still a downright just as an amazing of an experience as it always has been if you ride on a track that has proper pre-made ruts and roughness and ruts going up the jump faces and kickers and all that like they used to do pre-erode, right? But I feel like when you really look at both of these games as a comparison, it's like MX Simulator is sort of more so ran its course, as you'd call it, and it's kind of getting to that point to where they're trying to reinvent the wheel that didn't need to be reinvented, and it's still struggling because it's running off of a older game engine. It's like the game itself is outrunning the engine that it was made off of, hence the whole, it's like an MX Simulator 2, but you're still stuck in the MX Simulator 1's engine, so then it creates a plethora of different problems, feels like it's 2 different games, whereas MX Bikes with the newer game engine has this, feels like it's this unlimited possibility with future updates type feeling to it, and they could just continue to expand and build on the physics and the terrain deformation and make everything better with MX Bikes, whereas MX Simulator feels more like it's already this established thing. And with one developer, do you really think you're going to get an MX Simulator 2? Probably not. Do you really think the erode in MX Simulator is going to get all that much better? It's probably not. You can't just magically change a game engine from 2007. You can't do that, bro. The terrain deformation in MX Simulator basically is what it is at this point, and the developer himself has said that before. There's just so much to the both of these games, and your opinion on it is going to be so drastically changed depending on like what kind of motocross gamer you are. If you're more of a casual player, MX Bikes is probably going to feel a little better. If you're more super hardcore, let me play this game for 10,000 hours, literally, MX Simulator is probably going to be a little more down your alley for that because it, like I say, it's that more fully completed physics system. There's no aspect of MX Simulator that feels like this weird unfinished feeling on the bike. Whereas like with MX Bikes, it still has the issue where if you're going slow up a hill it's like, what the hell's the bike doing? You know, it's still got a couple little things that I promise you they will be updating and fixing at some point with MX Bikes beta updates that they haven't fixed yet. So there's still kind of that physics development going on with MX Bikes, whereas MX Simulator is already basically completed. So that's kind of your two different worlds. And now we're to the point where MX Bikes is starting to get a little more caught up with having a bunch of custom tracks on it and replica tracks. And, you know, it's really starting to get to that sort of level, which was something I spoke about MX Bikes lacking a little bit 3 or 4 years ago compared to MX Simulator. But now they're really starting to get it. MX Bikes is really starting to get a genuine community behind it. So it's becoming an actual competitor to MX Simulator versus it used to just be kind of a joke when you would talk about the two together. But it's not to say that MX Bikes' physics just blows MX Simulator's physics out of the water or anything like that. I still don't believe that. Even though they have updated and fixed a lot of the weird little buggy physics system issues with MX Bikes and made the game a little more playable, it still doesn't feel as completed, you know, fully 100% completed of a physics system as what MX Simulator feels to me, right? And there's also this other little weird issue with MX Bikes. With a ton of the tracks in the game, they just don't feel like the scaling is the proper size and how fast you can go on the tracks. I feel like when you compare it to MX Simulator, and certainly if you've played a lot of MX Simulator, one of the first things you should be thinking when you get in there on MX Bikes is, damn, really the scaling of these tracks should be about 10% bigger, and the speed of the bike should be about 10% faster. That's what I feel like when I go from MX Simulator to MX Bikes. It feels like every aspect of the track is too cramped on MX Bikes compared to MX Sim. It just feels like, and it's not, I'm not talking about every single track, I'm just talking about as a whole, you know, majority. You know, there's still some tracks on MX Simulator that are way too tight, way too small scaling. And there's some tracks that on MX Bikes that are awesome scaling and have perfect corners and perfect jumps. But I'm just talking about majority of the tracks that I've rode on in both games. It just seems like MX Bikes is trying to go for this way more hyper-realistic scaling. And again, like I've always said, why would you try to go in there and make a literal one-to-one scaling track in a dirt bike simulator? It seems like it's all this perfect plan. Like, of course you would do that in a dirt bike simulator. So you try to get it as accurate to real life as you can. But, you know, correct me if I'm wrong. Is MX Bikes literal real-life dirt bike riding? Is it? Is it actual everything exactly like real-life motocross racing? I don't think so. So there's a difference between riding a literal real-life dirt bike on a real one-to-one scaling track than there is going in there and playing a video game. It's two different things. So if you don't adjust your scaling a little bit to fit and flow the corners of the game better and make the jumps slightly bigger than they would be in real life to give you a little more jump fun factor, if you don't do these little things, it can give you more of a bland, slow, more boring experience. And I feel like I experienced that a little more on most of the tracks of MX Bikes than I do MX Simulator. But I also just feel like you go faster with the new dynos of MX Simulator than you do with the new dynos of MX Bikes. So, and also there's a lot of issues with the pro racing organization of MX Simulator and the cheating, hacking, scamming of MX Simulator and no anti-cheat. It's got a plethora of other issues within the pro racing of the game. You know, the biggest pro racing organization on MX Simulator literally shut down a couple years back and then came back with completely different people than it had before. So it's like this whole different thing than it was before when it was really popping off. And then with MX Bikes, you don't really even have that super full-blown esports level series in the game yet. You do have like somewhat of an esports series, but not to the level that RF is for MX Simulator. So you still don't really have that for MX Bikes yet, so we haven't been able to see the true test of time as far as, you know, how many hackers are they going to get on MX Bikes and what is the you know, esports people that are the esports officials going to actually do about it with MX bikes. With MX Simulator, if you get caught key sharing, they'll just let you back in a year later. They've proved to do that countless and countless and countless times in that game. So even if you literally cheat to the level of letting somebody else ride for you in a full-blown paid professional race, it's okay if you get caught. You'll just get let back in a year later. It's all good. No big deal. That's if you even get caught. Not even half of the people even get caught on MX Simulator. So it's got a plethora of issues in its own right, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're definitely completely two different games, even though they're kind of the same. It's hard to explain that, but MX Bikes is definitely slower paced, tighter corners, more realistic graphics, more of that modern game engine feel. MX Simulator's kind of got this older graphical look to it, but like a undeniable feeling physics system. Whenever you get deep enough into it, you start to realize how it's literally a fucking dream. It's literally unbelievable how one person made the feeling of MX Simulator. It's just unbelievable, and don't even come close to describing it. But yeah, you have these other elements with MX bikes, like more realistic system of tear-offs, and terrain deformation feels more realistic on MX bikes. It's got more stuff like realistic gearbox shit. There's quite a few other little more hyper-realistic things sort of happening with MX bikes than MX Sim. MX Simulator is more of a game than it is like a super hyper realistic. But the whole thing is the feeling of MX Simulator as far as on the bike is as hyper realistic as you're ever going to get. That's the thing. Even though it doesn't have tear-offs and, a simulated gearbox and this, that, and another, it still has the feeling there of a literal real-life dirt bike. It just does, man. It just does. I mean, there's a reason why people still play this game a decade and a half later. There's a reason why, bro. And that's the other thing. Whenever you have that smaller track scaling and the bike feels a little bit slower, you can only go so fast on a tight, small scaling track. You know what I'm saying? So that's what, to me, gives the feeling like there's a little bit more of that room for skill gap on most of the tracks with MX Simulator whenever you directly compare them to MX bikes. Because you're going faster. The corners have that little bit bigger expanded scaling to where you can hold the gas longer around the corners on MX Simulator than you can on MX bikes. I'm not saying you can't hold the gas down on MX bikes, because you definitely can in the corners, but I'm saying as a whole, majority of all the tracks that I've rode on in both these games, it just seems like the majority of the MX bikes tracks have that, you get in the middle of the rut and then all of a sudden the rut turns twice as sharp as you think it would on MX bikes. There's like a lot of these weird little things with a bunch of the custom tracks in that game that feel kind of like that. I don't know if I've ever seen another motocross game last as long as MX Simulator. I really don't. I mean, the only thing you can even compare it to is Reflex, and that's the GOAT of arcade motocross games. Don't at me, bro. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely still a lot of things to MX Simulator that are very cool, very amazing. But I just think, like I say, with that identity issue, they're going to have to get their shit figured out on MX Sim, or MX Bikes is going to take over. And that's really all there is to it. So either way, definitely let me know down in the comments what you guys think about it. I'm sure you will anyways. Certainly the haters. But that hate just motivates the Spency boy. That's all that's ever done. I really feel like it just comes down to personal preference when you talk about both of these games. I mean, it's like, do you want the better graphics, more modern engine, a little bit easier to get into, a little more of an arcadey feeling at the start of it? Or do you want that more, absolutely hardcore as hell simulator that's going to punish you severely trying to learn it, and be in that game that is a little bit more developed, a little bit more completed, has been established for 10 plus years and has, probably triple the amount of custom content than MX Bikes has because it's been around for 3 times as long. They're just two different worlds, man. The whips feel different. The cameras feel different. The speed of the game feels different. The tracks feel different. The physics feel different. Even though they're both simulators, they're different in a ton of different ways. And everybody's opinion is going to be different depending on which one they got into, to what amount and what kind of gamer they are and what kind of games they prefer. And sometimes the feeling just feels better to this guy and not as good to that guy for a plethora of different reasons. But at the end of the day, I feel like if you're going to play a dirt bike simulator, it would be a disgrace to just never play MX Simulator. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, you're going to go play a first-person get into the first-person shooters genre for the first time, but literally never, ever play, the original Call of Duty Modern Warfare, or never play, Halo 1 and 2. It just wouldn't make any sense to never play those games, but then be in this kind of genre of gaming. Yes, there is a shitload of issues going on right now with MX Simulator that have developed over the past 3 or 4 years. That's really where I would put the downfall of MX Simulator starting, like right when RF shut down, and then tried to come back with all different people, and then all these guys that were in the tippity top of the pro racing of the game finally getting caught key sharing and cheating in the game, and then all the hacks coming out in the game. All that's really happened over the past 3 or 4 years with MX Sim. So it's been on a downcline, and MX Bikes has currently been on an incline, getting on Steam, getting all the community behind it and the track makers behind it. So, it's definitely in MX Bikes' ball field right now, and if MX Simulator doesn't do something, it's just going to be that underground game that nobody knows about and nobody cares about and has no extra support around it, Now there's that other competitor game where it's not just all about MX Simulator anymore. So I think time's going to tell over these next 4 or 5 years, RF and the pro racing of MX Simulator drives that game. So whenever those people make mistakes and do the wrong thing and have way too high of a road for 2 years or whatever the case may be, or all the bugs and the issues that they allowed to be in the pro racing, whatever it is, or the hacking, cheating, letting people back in that have key shared, all that kind of crap, it all goes in to really affect MX Simulator at this point. And with MX Bikes, it's still kind of just in that fun stage where, it hasn't really gotten to that point where there's that full-blown RF level pro racing in the game. So, but I think we will see that in the next 3 or 4 years, depending on how much MX Bikes grows. So we're going to see everything. We're going to see how it all unfolds. You never know. So yeah, man, either way, appreciate you guys watching all the videos. Later, dudes.